All righty. All right. So once again, thank you, Phil. I appreciate you meeting with me. So I just had some introductory questions and then we'll jump into it. Um, so your name, I have it as Phil Ray.
Yes.
Okay. Do you mind sharing how old you are?
I'm 41.
You look great for 41.
Thank you.
I need to go to Brazil. Okay. Uh, and then how would you categorize your education level?
University. Yeah.
Okay. All right. And then how long have you been living abroad?
Since 2009 or 10, I can never remember. I'm terrible with dates, but somewhere around there.
All right.
So
Has
that's
it
what,
always
13
been,
years?
wow, that's great. Has it
Yeah.
always been Brazil or have you lived other places?
No, Brazil for like full move. Yeah.
Okay.
Brazil.
All right. And then last introductory question. If you do work, what do you do?
Oh, here I work with education. So I work in a high school here. I started out teaching English because that's what everybody does pretty much to make some cash when they come to Brazil. But I actually like teaching. Some people do it just out of necessity, the English teaching, just to make some extra cash. But I
Mhm.
actually like doing it. I worked with education in the US too. So it was an easy fit. And then eventually I got hooked up with high school. So now I work in the high school.
Great. I love teaching too. I'm actually a college professor. So
Oh, there you go.
yeah, I found my purpose. I feel so lucky to have found that. Um, all right. So now we got past the introductory. My first question was before moving to the US, can you kind of describe what your life was like before moving abroad?
Well, you said before moving to the US, did you mean before moving to Brazil?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes.
No, but you actually made a good mistake because I was actually born in Brazil. I was born here and I was adopted very young, like at around 1 or 2 years of age. And then my adopted family, which is Brazilian, my whole family is Brazilian. My sister married an American, and then she moved to the US around 78, 1980, around that time. And then eventually my parents moved there too. So it was kind of, you misspoke, but you misspoke correctly. So I did move to the US and I do remember my life before. And it's interesting because uh, some of those same feelings that I had when I was very little, moving out of the country, out of Brazil to the US, was somewhat similar coming back, because you're leaving so much behind. And I had decided that, okay, this is a big move. And I had to leave a lot of things behind, kind of have a fresh life, look at things from a different perspective. And as a young boy, of course, you're not realizing that you're registering all of this. You're just stressing out, which I was. But then going back, sitting back with myself and thinking back on my life, I see that, hey, I was going through the same anxiety and, oh my God, what am I doing? But at 6, and that came out in its own way. And down here, it was that feeling of like, oh my God, is this gonna be okay? But it turned out wonderful. It turned out wonderful. The first year or two was rough, but then it all kind of smoothed out, more or less.
Oh, okay. I'll come back to that first year or two being rough. What motivated you to move back to Brazil?
A lot of personal stuff,
Okay.
which I don't really want to get into too much of that, but a lot of personal stuff, family wise and personal wise, which I
Mhm.
think is what drives a lot of people to move. At least from my experience talking to a lot of expats, because here I've managed to really get into the expat communities down here, and they tell their stories, and a lot of them, other than love is the other thing. You meet somebody and then down here, but a lot of it you see people that just want something different. They're kind of, for whatever reason, their life seems to be just going in circles, and then they travel. Sometimes it's not with the idea of like, I want to move to this country, but for whatever reason, the country does something to them when they're here. Like my plan was not to stay in Brazil. It really was not. I was gonna come to Brazil, stay here for maybe 2 years, three tops, and then go to Europe, go to India. India is like on my bucket list of places to visit. But some of that rough stuff kept me in Brazil a little bit longer because I had to like make money pretty much. Yeah, get myself together financially. And then I realized as I'm doing that, that hey, I'm kind of falling in love with this place, you know. And before you know it, I was dating, and then before you know it, I had a dog, and then before you know it, like, oh my God, I'm like living in Brazil. Like it just crept up on me, you know. So I'm here, and it's like I love it. You know, it has its downsides, like every place on planet Earth.
Mhm.
Just that Brazil is an intense country. I say this a lot. I'm finishing a book about my time here. And one of the mantras of the book that I keep repeating is that Brazil's a little bipolar. I joke that it's a little bipolar in that the good is like the best good you've ever experienced in your life. Like you're
Mhm.
going to be like, wow, your brain's just going to go, wow, what is this? It's so good. But the negative is just as bad. It's like you've never been to like, you know, like in Buddhism, they have the levels of hell.
Mhm.
That's where you're going to be. You're going to be in the levels of hell when it comes to when Brazil gets bad. And you just, once you kind of accept that, and then you learn how to kind of swerve away from the stuff that is just a headache and a pain in the butt, then it's like, wow, this country can really do so much for you in many areas, personal, spiritual, even work wise. You know, it's a little bit tough for down here, obviously, it's a developing nation, but even work wise, you can have a good time here. So there's a lot to get out of Brazil.
I love that. You start dating and then you're like, and then I had a dog.
Yeah. And
Love
he
it.
was walking around.
Love it. All right. So you had mentioned that your first year or two was a little rough. Can you kind of elaborate like what made it difficult or with that adjustment or
Well, I think that's what do you call it? It's like the training ground, you know, when
okay.
you for you when you are moving abroad. I think any country is going to give you kind of a rough time the first year. One, the language. Even though I spoke Portuguese, it was so
Mhm.
funny because I grew up in a Brazilian household. So I came to Brazil feeling myself like I know how to speak this language. You know, I grew up listening to Portuguese. Man, was I wrong. Because
Mhm.
it's one thing your mom telling you clean your room in Portuguese, wash the dishes in Portuguese, don't come home after this time in Portuguese. It's another thing like having a conversation doing in Portuguese, which I never
Right.
had with anybody. So my brain hurt for about a month. It took about a month. And then, even then, it took about a year or two before I felt like comfortable speaking Portuguese. So,
Mhm.
of course, the language is a barrier. I used to speak Portuguese at this velocity because it was really, really difficult for me. And São Paulo is a huge city. We, if you consider even the metropolitan area, we got about 20 million. In the city, it's about 9 to 10, but there's greater São Paulo, and that number gets big fast. So you have people from all over Brazil here. So you're hearing different accents, different slangs, idiomatic phrases. It's just a whole nother beast, you know. So language, but I think anywhere in the world that would give you, you know, a little bit of a headache in the start, and cultural differences, of course.
Right.
I'm sure, like, if you went to Japan, you'd feel the same if you came to Brazil. I mean, Brazil, it's a little bit easier because São Paulo is an international city. It is a Western country, so some Western values, whatever cultural things are not that much different, but it's still a different country, different culture that you have to get used to. And Brazil, for being a developing nation, it's rough sometimes. You know, the
Mhm.
economy goes up and then it goes really down, and then we have a protest over here. Since I've been here, look at this. It's so crazy. I came here when Lula is the president that's president now. So
Right.
spoilers about the craziness.
Mhm.
You know, so when I came here in 2009, I think it was in his last year, the president that came after him, there were major protests against her. She was impeached. The second, the president that we had before Lula is probably going to go to jail. Lula went to jail. Now Lula is president. Like, so if you think American politics is wacky, American politics is like a cakewalk compared to this is just since I've been here. So we've had an impeachment, one guy that's being investigated and is probably going to go to jail, and one that actually did go to jail but got out of jail to become president again. So like my brain's like, ah. So all this stuff though, it adds to the uncertainty that is living in Brazil. And that's one thing foreigners, when they come here, they get a little bit frustrated because it seems like Brazilians don't plan. Brazilians are like very fly by night, wishy-washy, and people say that a lot about even other Latin countries. It just seems like it's part of the culture. They're not like how we grew up in the US, like like us. We set up the time, we're here exactly. Like for example, there were folks that were going to come here to take some stuff out of my yard at 8:30 this morning. They're not here. They will probably show up in the middle of this interview. So that's Brazil though. You just kind of, that's it. You just know that's what happens. But I stopped getting so frustrated with it and that's where it comes into like the rough stuff helps you, ground yourself. When I realized, yeah, but I can't plan anymore 2 years ahead down
Right.
here, because I don't know what's going to happen in 2 years. Like literally, we have a president that was in jail, whether you agree with him being in jail or not. That's insane. Like who would in a million years guess that would happen? So I understand a little bit of the Brazilian mentality of like, yeah, we're not gonna plan for 10 years because how can you in this country? So that rough patch taught me, how to use my money better, how to work smarter, how to make friends a little bit wiser. And so it's a growing thing. So I like being in the furnace. I think, if you travel abroad, a lot of times you have people that have their YouTube channels and they're showing the beaches and this, and it seems
Yeah.
so wonderful. And traveling is, but living is a different beast. So it's good that you understand that, hey, that first 6 months to a year, you're going to be like, what am I doing? Why did I leave the US? Where everything works, if I call somebody, they come, et cetera, et cetera. But you get the hang of it or you don't and you leave. And I think that's fair too. I think that's totally fair. Maybe it's not for you, get out. So everybody can have a different experience when they travel, especially in a country as big as Brazil. Brazil, I always say Brazil, think of the US. US is west to east, just flip it, north to
Okay.
south. It's more or less the same size. It's that big of a country. And just like the US, Californians are totally different from New Yorkers
Right.
or Philadelphians. Philadelphians are very different from New Yorkers. We're better. So it's the same way. Flip that country north south. If I go from Sao Paulo to Rio de Janeiro, I can be in Rio in 5 hours on a bus. It's a different world. It's a
Right.
totally different Brazil. I'm not a big fan of Rio, uh, but I love Sao Paulo. I love and that's totally fair. There's people that are the opposite. They are absolutely in love with Rio and they hate Sao Paulo. That's fair. They're completely different. There's, two very different cities, different people, different ways of talking, walking, acting. So it's part of the journey. And in that journey is when you start to discover who you are, what you can handle, what you can handle, what you're willing to deal with or not deal with. The BS, your BS meter goes, man. I used to be such a softie in the US. That's the thing that I love the most about traveling to Brazil is that it toughened me up. Like I always thought of myself as a real independent person. I left the house at 17, 18, got my own apartment in Philly, to go to school. So I always was so proud of myself. Like I'm an independent guy, I don't need mommy and daddy to do everything for me. And then I came to Brazil and I realized, okay, I may be independent, but I'm not tough. I mean, tough for American standards, maybe, yeah. But like, I realized I needed an extra toughness, and I needed an
Mhm.
extra BS shield, especially, and be able to say what's on my mind. I was always very shy and, a bit more introverted and unable to say what I really feel about things. Here, I lost that. You got to, or you're not going to survive. And so it's all been like a great growth experience, even the rough patches. And there's been others, but not, I think that first one was the roughest. In 2015 was really rough during the impeachment of the president. It was just really a tough time economically. Everybody suffered, not just me. A lot of people
Right.
lost their jobs. Um, Everything in the country was tanking at the moment, which prompted, the popular movements to get her impeached. So if I survive that, I always joke on my channel. I always say, if I survive the Dilma years, I can survive anything, because that was a really, really rough time here in the US or in Brazil.
Okay. Quick question now. When you say toughness and like detecting like the BS, what do you mean by that? Is it toughness as in physical, you have to be aware of your surroundings, or toughness of handling different environments, just being adaptable?
Yes. The toughness that I speak of is not physical toughness, although I do like to stay fit. It's mental toughness, it's spiritual
Right.
toughness, which again, it's relative, because in the US, yeah, I thought I was a pretty resilient kid. Like I said to you at the beginning, our family moved to the US when I was 6. That's a big shock for a little kid. I
Right.
only came to realize that later, but I had a emotional breakdown. I had a really
Mhm.
big breakdown when I was in first grade. I ended up in a principal's office. I fought some kids. Anyway,
Mhm.
it was because I was stressed. It was
Right.
just the impact of that stressful move of leaving all my friends behind, leaving the life behind. So I realized in the States, okay, I've always kind of a weird kid, kind of, doing my own thing. So I always walked my own path, but I don't think I was tough. I think I
Right.
was, and I think in the US, it was a little bit easier for me to avoid certain things like bullies and stuff like that. I never
Mhm.
really got bullied or anything, but it was like tougher to avoid um, people that could stress you out or put you in a
Right.
situation that where you have to speak up and say, "Look, this is not going to happen. Like, you're being a jerk or whatever." In Brazil, it's different, because regardless of rich, poor, middle class, there's I don't know, in Native American cultures they have the coyote,
Mhm.
right? The trickster.
Right.
Here in Brazil they call it the malandro. And there's this bit of the malandro culture in Brazil, from rich to middle class to poor. Again, it goes back to the fact that the country is very um um what do you call it? Unstable. You don't know what's
Mhm.
coming next. You don't know what's coming next. So in order to survive that, you have to be a little bit quick-witted and
Mhm.
grimy sometimes. And so that meant that for me to be able to survive here, I needed to learn how to tell people exactly how I feel about a situation. If I like it, if I don't, I'm leaving, I'm not leaving, whatever. Just speak up. I wasn't able to
Right.
do that before. So that type of toughness, and also adaptability to the 10th power, because again of how the country runs, because I realized, hey, the company where you are making X amount of dollars, or reais, here we have reais, not dollars,
Mhm.
this month might close down the next month, which
Mhm.
happens. That's part of the toughness. I was working for this great company. Then they decided to completely change the culture of the company. They brought in some new program that everybody hated. All our clients left. And I went from making however, amount
Mhm.
to I didn't make enough to pay my rent. It was like
Right.
that bad.
Right.
So here I am looking for work, like, oh my God, what am I gonna do? Blah blah blah. And so stuff like that teaches you how to be tough in a different way that I wasn't used to in the US. So the toughness that I speak of is this. In Portuguese, they have a term that's it's a country mantra, which is jogo de cintura. Jogo de cintura is basically like if you think of your waistline, have a little bit of flack there, little space, so you can gain a couple pounds and the pants will still fit, right? So that's a very famous Brazilian expression. It's an idiomatic phrase that everybody knows. Why? Because it's part of living here. You got to be able to be flexible. You gotta, those pants can't be on too tight. You know, you got to be able to flex when you need to. So yeah, I've already had that in me, thankfully, because I'm come from an immigrant family. And before we really got settled down, you know, the last place that I lived before university was Atco, New Jersey. But it was a long road to Atco, man. You know, every
Right.
3 years, more or less, our family would move because they were moving up, you know,
Mhm.
the ladder. So we started in my sister's bedroom, and then we got a little apartment, and then we moved to a townhouse to eventually buy. My parents bought their own house, and that was all moving, you know,
Right.
in making new friends and leaving friends behind. So I already had a little bit of that in me, but I wasn't prepared for how much of that I would need and you know, grow on top of when I came here to Brazil. You got to, for Brazil specifically. You know, I can't speak for other countries if it's gonna be as intense, but here definitely is, to the point where people who are very well traveled, like I said, I work with a lot of expats, and they've, you know, I know guys that and gals who've traveled a lot and lived in other countries, and they're like, wow, Brazil is difficult. It's a difficult country if you want to live here. Another famous expression here from Brazil is from Antonio Carlos Jobim, the famous composer of Garota de Ipanema, the girl from Ipanema. He said, Brazil is not for amateurs. Brasil não é para amador. And he is damn right. It is not. It is not. Because I've seen some seasoned expats just get broken in Brazil. And it's weird to see, but the ones that seem to make it are the ones that learn how to not lose themselves. Like, I'm not gonna
Mhm.
lose who I am, like my what I grew up with, but I have to grow past it too,
Right.
and and get in the flow of how the culture is. Because otherwise, you're swimming upstream. You're just not gonna make it. You got to go with the flow of what Brazil is. Like I said, it's a huge country, so maybe if one city doesn't work for you, move to another. Even in São Paulo, like São Paulo's huge. There's neighborhoods here I would never live, and they're nice neighborhoods. I'm not saying because it's dangerous or anything. No, just really nice neighborhoods. I would never live there. I'd be bored out of my brains. So I love where I live. I've been in this neighborhood for about 10 years.
Mhm.
So when you leave your home and search for that second home, you really got to consider all these things and not take it lightly, because it can be hell if you happen to find a place that you do not feel at home. Get out, get out. There's no reason to be here otherwise.
Right. Right. So when you were going through that adjustment period, what kept you in Brazil? Like, what kept you from going, you know what, I'm just going to go back, or I'm going to go
Oh my
somewhere
God,
else?
that's easy. Beer and samba and people that are joyous and they want to party all the time. And there's a party on a Monday night. And you're like, what? But okay, let's go. And just there's there's a like I always say, in the US, we have the Southern hospitality, you know,
Mhm.
in Brazil has a lot of that, especially from people that are from the north of Brazil, because, you know, we're on the other end of the equator here. So the north is where it's hot, and that's where it's
Right.
more country. So these folks, they're just so sweet and nice. And like I said, like for like the good that you have here, like the good experiences, you're like,
Mhm.
good Lord, like how is this even possible? You know, because like in the US, well, you said you're from Philly. Come on.
Right.
I'm not going to a club by myself in Philly, staring at these guys with these mugs on. They got the glasses on, all with the mean face.
Right.
You can't look at them because it's a fight. What you looking at? Oh, what you looking at?
Right.
Ah, it's not happening. It didn't happen. Brazil. Okay, I got my friends here, but every once in a while, no, everybody's busy. I'll go out by myself. I'll have the time of my life. I'll go to like a bar, karaoke club, funky, whatever, Brazilian funk. And I have the time of my life. Carnival was just last, 2 weeks ago. Some days I went out with some friends. Other days I went out by myself, and I had good times both times
Mm,
because the people are friendly. They don't want to fight. They want to get together. They want to dance. So that's the stuff that keeps you in
yeah.
Brazil. And then you realize, oh wait, I actually have to have a job here. And then you meet Mr. Red Tape Bureaucracy, and you're like, fuck, that's place. But then once you manage that and you get in the groove, you find ways to avoid that side of Brazil as much as possible. Like stay over there and enjoy the good things. And the good things are just the good things, man. No
Right.
snow.
I hate snow. I hate snow. It's
A
I
friend of
am a
mine
I'm a
just
warm baby, like warm weather.
yeah, a friend of mine just had to go back to New York, like kind of emergency. She lives here in São Paulo, and she's like, oh no, take me back to Brazil." Like she's just happy she's got good food because she's Haitian, so they have good Haitian
Okay.
food up in New York. But aside from that, you could see she's just like, no, it's too cold. Get me the hell out of here.
Yeah.
Um, so that's what it is. Like you feel it as soon as you get out the plane, just this friendliness. And I've been back to the US just once since I've been here, and it was good. Another expression. I'm a good expression person, but a good idiomatic expression that they have here. Another one from Jobim, because Jobim was very popular in the 1970s. Uh, a little trivia: he was the second most recorded artist behind the Beatles during the 70s. He was huge. Bossa Nova, Girl from Ipanema, that stuff was huge. And so he lived for a while in New York. And he had a famous phrase that I love that he comparing, Brazil to the US. And he said, the US is good, but it's bad. Brazil is bad, but it's good, you know? And you can only really understand that once you're in Brazil, because yes, it's a developing nation. So you have real third world issues here,
Right.
because when you think developing, it's like, yeah, I live in a city that's modern as hell. Some stuff that you'll see here, it'll be like beyond even stuff that you see in the US as far as modern, but it's
Right.
developing. So there's the other end. It's third world. There's some real third world stuff here too. And there's corruption in the government, and there's high taxes, and it's all the stuff that comes with developing nations. So it's bad. It's bad if you compare it to the US. The US works, in relative terms compared to Brazil, but it's good here. The people that you meet, like yesterday, I was at this. They have this mega YMCA here. Like I don't even want to call it a YMCA because YMCA looks like a little shack compared to this thing, with pools and live music. And I go there, uh, and I met this lady there. How did I meet her? I was just swimming. Actually, no, a friend of mine invited me to go, and this friend I met there, and she just started talking to me like I was swimming, like just doing my thing, and then she starts talking to me. I like her. She's cool. We hang out. We've been friends since then, about 4 years. So she invites me to go there. She's there with her son, and she's like, "Oh, come down to Seski. That's the name of the place, Seski. Come down here." I was like, all right. So I go there. When I get there, she's already talking to this other lady. Brazilian's a talker, as you can tell. Uh, so she's talking to this other lady. So I'm like, well, I might as well join the conversation. Now I'm friends with the other lady. So she invites me yesterday. Yeah, let's go to Saski. So I'm there. So I'm like, that would never happen in the US. Like, just I'm at a community pool and I'm actually having a community experience. I'm not like, why are you sitting so close to me? Can't you see my towers right here? Give me at least 3 feet. Like, no, like I'm actually having a community experience in a community center and just meeting people, and they're sweet people. So stuff like that is stuff that I feel is Brazilian.
Right.
And it's the stuff that keeps people in Brazil, despite all the rigmaroles and the annoying stuff, having to get paperwork done and all that stuff. But when after you leave the registry agency, whatever, and then you have some good street food, you're like, it was a rough day, but it's over.
I like that. I like that.
Got something in my throat. Anyway,
Ah,
what was your question? I'm sorry.
asking about, since you were bringing up the bureaucracy kind of, you got to fill out forms or that. I was curious to know, how does the law or the legal system of Brazil play into your adjustment? Like, coming from the US, the way things work there legally, did that play a role in your adjustment to new laws or legal system in Brazil?
Yeah, the laws here aren't that much different.
Okay.
I guess it's just the application of the law. Like it's kind of loosey goosey.
Mm-hmm.
The justice system is very much slanted towards the rich and powerful, which is, you could say, it not much different than the US, but it's very much, who happens to be at the front desk. You know, if you go to get like your passport or your residence card or whatever, it can be a 10-hour journey. It can be a 30-minute journey, depending. So that's the stuff that's frustrating because it's not very, what's the word? I forgot, like standardized.
Right.
So, well, in the US, we have one agency like that everybody loves, the DMV, right? Uh, so imagine like the DMV multiplied for everything. And I'm not saying US government agencies are like heaven on earth. They're not. But just whatever frustration you feel there, just multiply that by 100, and then you get the frustration you're going to feel here with the bureaucracy and the government agencies. Like for me, like I wanted to get a Brazilian passport. That was such a pain in the butt. It took me 3 trips to go. You got to go to the federal police building. Mention you want to scare expats, or like bringing trauma back. Just say PF, which is Polícia Federal, federal police,
Uh,
because they will go into shock. They will go into absolute shock because it's the website, like my friend was trying to get his what do you call it, his residency renewed. The website said, oh, we don't have an immigration service. Like, how do you not have an immigration service? Like, that's your job. So he goes all the way to the place, and then the one day they say no, we can't do it, so he has to go back another day. Same thing happened to me. Like I went one day, and apparently there was some photocopy that I forgot to make. Like you got to take reams of paper. Here, it's so funny. They Everybody has a little pasta, a little folder with all their, like, all the way back from your birth certificate, and it's got to be a copy, a notarized copy. I joke, like, bring a vial of blood just in case, and maybe even a urine sample, because you never know. Because then you show up there, like they have the stuff on the website, but then you show up there and they'll tell you something else that wasn't on the website. And if you tell them, oh, this wasn't on the website, well, yeah, because the website got updated or hasn't been updated yet. You're like, well, you can't say anything because it's the police. so you're very nice and you say, okay, I'll be back tomorrow. So then I go back tomorrow and the place is closed because it's Public Servants Day. The holiday that everybody knows. It's like Martin Luther King Day. Everybody knows Public Servants Day, right? So of course I knew that this day was it. So I take this long trip to the federal police. It's closed. So then I go back a third day. I'm like, good Lord. Or when I came to Brazil, because like I said, I was born here, so I didn't have to get residency or anything like that. But I did have to get all my Brazilian paperwork to prove that, I'm a citizen of this country. it took forever because like imagine, like, to put it in the US perspective, it would be like, speaking of Philly, one agency to get one piece of paperwork is like deep in South Philly, almost at the stadiums. And then, but they tell you, look, before you get this, you got to go all the way up to Temple and get something over there. And then the third thing is like, no, it's like Southwest Philly. No, that's where that agency is. You got to go. And you're like, what the hell? And Philly's a small city. So that's almost manageable.
Right.
Sao Paulo is like 10 times the size of Philadelphia. So I'm traveling. I got to know the city. I mean, that was the positive side of it. But it was insane, and I gave up at the last one because the last one was getting the I had to swear to the flag, because I haven't been here. And here you do have to do military enlistment when you're 18, obligatory. And I said, man, I'm not doing that until I had to get the passport. So then they're like, oh, you can't get this passport because you don't have the paperwork saying that you enlisted for the army. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. So then I found out where to do this. So there I am with a bunch of like 18, 19-year-olds, you know, saluting the flag like I'm going to go in the army. It's like stuff like that is just drives you nuts, and they built this agency here since then called Popa Tempo, which literally means save time. It's made it a little bit better because they kind of just put all these agencies in one spot, and you can go online and you set up a day to go. It's been much easier because I've lost my ID here about 6 times. That's another thing. I'm not used to walking around with ID. I never had to do it in the US. I mean, you got your driver's license, but if you're not driving, you got no ID on you for the most part. And here you got to have an ID. So I lose it all the time, because I'm just not used to carrying a piece of paper with me. So it's made it much easier for me to get these new IDs whenever I lose them. So it's that. Like if anything like that happens, I just my spirit, my energy just goes down because I'm like, oh. Or if you lose your credit card or anything that requires like I got to take a whole day to do this, because I lost my credit card. So then I know that I could ask for it by mail, but the mail takes forever. So I know I'm gonna have to go to the other side of the city to go to the bank. Oh, it's just it's really a pain in the butt. And it seems like I'm just complaining about regular stuff. Trust me. Like whatever it is regular stuff,
Right.
but it times 100, like the difficulty to get it done. So like I said, if y'all love the DMV, just think of the DMV, but multiply that by 100. It's just a place you don't want to go, right? If I say, "Hey, let's take a trip to the DMV, get some stuff done," you're gonna be like, I'm busy. I gotta go visit my grandma." You come up with some excuse, right? So it's the same. It's intense. That part is really frustrating. Wait, let me tell you one last story that I think was. It's like you think that I'm making this up, and I'm not. I met this dude here at this English school where I was working. And he was a young guy. He was like 20, 21. This was about 7 years ago. So he's trying to get, he got a cell phone. So here you got to buy a chip to put on your phone.
Right.
So it works, a SIM card. But to get the SIM card, you need a number called a CPF. A CPF is sort of like a social security slash
Okay.
ID. You got to get the CPF.
Mm-hmm.
But for him to get this CPF, he went to this agency to get the CPF. They told him you need to get a letter from this other agency first, to allow us to give you the CPF. So he goes to this other agency and they tell him you can only have this letter if you have a CPF. So like I swear I couldn't make this up. So trust me, it's a real story. And I'm pretty sure he wasn't making this up either. So he gave up. He gave up to the point where he left the country. He's like, I am not built for this BS. I'm out. And he was a nice guy. I wish he would have stayed. He was a really nice guy. But I think he lasted like 3 weeks in Brazil when he's like, I'm out. Like, I'm not doing this. So yes, if you have a little bit of patience. I have zero patience. I always like to say I'm very tolerant. I have a lot of tolerance. My tolerance level is high. I don't have a lot of patience. So I had to work patience here in Brazil. If you can work your patience a little bit, you you'll get past it. And then once you get past it, then it's like Moses, like the land of milk and honey. It's in front of you, you know? But you got to spend those 40 years in the desert first. You're gonna be roughing it for a little bit until you get to the good stuff. And the good stuff's out there, man. Brazil is incredible. It's fucking incredible. Excuse my language, but it's incredible.
You're fine. You're fine. So you bring up the police. So coming from the United States, going to Brazil's police, do you have kind of the same issues that people worry about dealing with the police? Is it in a different way? Like, how are police interactions?
Well, you're going to get different answers to this question depending on where people live in Brazil,
Okay.
especially because the Brazilian police, they kind of have a little bit of carte blanche. There's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of police killings here, a lot of assassinations, a lot of kids that go missing. So there's a YouTube channel that I follow that tells, Brazilian history, stuff from the day to day type history. And they had a great one last week. It was so tragic. It was these five kids. They were like 16, 17. This was back in the 80s. They just disappeared, you know? And the mom, of course, went crazy and she went to look, she went after who took these kids because the police weren't investigating. And she got to the point where she was inside of a prison talking to a police officer that had been arrested, who was explaining that, hey, this was a police killing, for whatever reason, either
Wow.
they mistook these kids for somebody, or maybe there was just one kid in the mix that they really wanted and everybody got taken. And
Mm-hmm.
these kids were assassinated. When she found out from this guy, who these people were that had assassinated her son, she was killed. On her way home, they
Wow.
stopped her, the car and assassinated her. So it's real, like it's intense. But that's what I said at the beginning. Depends on where you live, because this is a poorer region. The
Mm-hmm.
poor regions of Brazil, it is like a war zone. The favelas, here we call them the favelas, which are the Brazilian ghettos. That's where the gangs are. It's a lot of wonderful people in the favelas too, a lot of art, a lot of culture. I'm in the favelas all the time, but it's also where the gangs are. And so the police go in there like in SWAT uniforms. If anybody wants a good movie recommendation, watch Elite Squad. Elite Squad 1 and 2, a very famous Brazilian movie, Tropa de Elite. It breaks down with Wagner Moura, really great actor. It breaks down the this whole interplay of the police and the favela. In the best, I love part two even more than part one, because part one is just, he's a good cop, he wants to
Right.
go in there and let's kill the bad guys. And as he gets in there, he realizes it's deeper than that, you
Right.
know, and it changes him, and it changes how he perceives what the job that he's doing, because it's deeper than just the bad guys. Because you get rid of one, another one shows up. But hey, where are they? Who's financing these people? Oh, why is the mayor in the favela? And what's he? So you realize it goes way deeper than just a couple bad kids in the favela. So great movie if you want to understand that side of Brazil. So I totally get when people here, and I have some expat friends that live either in or near favelas, and
Mhm.
their interplay with the police is horrible. I have a friend of mine from Jersey who's been stopped a bunch of times. He said, I've never been robbed in Brazil aside from the police, right? Because they'll extort money out of him. Especially if they see that he's gringo. But since I don't live in the favelas, I have a different experience with the police, and which is similar to other people's experience, which is I'm less afraid of them than I am of American police. I get nervous around American police. The Brazilian
Mhm.
police, I don't get nervous around, but that's because I'm not in the favelas.
Right.
And when you're outside the favelas, then it's a different police, a different attitude. Then we are the people that they're trying to protect from the bad guys.
Mhm.
So they're very respectful. I mean, I've been stopped. I'm not going to say the first time I had a gun pulled on me was in Brazil by the police. But I was living in a very rich white upper class neighborhood, and I got my ass out of there right after that because I did realize that, yeah, if I leave the house and it's a Sunday morning, I'm hungover, I'm going to put on whatever shirt, put on some shorts, sandals, and go buy some coffee. I can't do that in that neighborhood because of the
Uh,
color of my skin,
right.
and I'll be followed because they're like, who's this guy? He's not from here because this is a white neighborhood. So I got guns pulled on me because I was walking with another friend that was from the suburbs, outside of this area. And you see two not white people in
Right.
shorts at night. We got targeted, whatever. But the thing that, like I said, if I were in the US, I would be freaking out more because I'd be afraid I'd probably get shot. In the US, I would
Mhm.
have that fear of I'm going to get shot. Whereas here, I have the feeling of like, this sucks. But if I'm just respectful, which I was, oh, excuse me, sir, always sir this. We were just walking home, sir, blah, blah, blah. Okay, they let me go. And this has
Mhm.
happened more than once where I've been stopped. I think I've been stopped like 3 or 4 times with the police here in 10 years. Okay. It's not like it's every weekend, but every time, same tactic, from my end. Just respectful, put my hands up. They do their little thing. Thank you. Bye bye. Go on your way. I have a, I feel a little bit safer about that police versus me interaction here in Brazil than in the US. Because in the US, man, whether it's in the ghetto or not in the ghetto, whether you're speaking politely or you're being an asshole, it looks like these people are ready to shoot you.
Right.
Like in here, I don't feel that way unless I was in a favela. Then I don't know. And I actually was in a favela once with my little sister when they had this mega operation, and they came in the house with their AKs and everything. We just sat on the couch. They were looking for somebody, and then they left. Um, but it seems like they're oh, this is terrible to say, but it seems like they're better trained here, but better trained as far as killing people, but also knowing not when they're not supposed to. Whereas in the US, it just seems like the cops are not trained. It's just like, oh, I want to be a cop. Okay, here, do your best. Whereas here, they're really trained for war. Like if you watch that movie Elite Troop, like it's in the name. It's an elite troop. They're like a SWAT team. And you see the police here, man, like you don't want to screw with them. Like they're big, they're tough because they're ready for intense things to happen, not
Right.
just they don't have traffic cops here. Here
Okay.
they have little cameras and they just kind of if you're doing something wrong, or they'll send you a ticket by the mail, or they have this company called CET, which is the company of transport. These yellow trucks. And they'll have a guy on the road and he'll be like, marking things down but they don't do traffic stops here. Like that's not a police job in Brazil. Police job in
Mhm.
Brazil is war. Like they're ready to kill people if they have to, or if they're in a more laid back neighborhood, just patrolling and kind of making sure everything's okay. So it's a different relationship that you have because in the US, yeah, like the police are your neighborhood person, that's doing everything from traffic stops to helping old ladies cross the street. That's the magical imaginary version of the police in the US. But that's the vision that we get, right? But so they're not, it doesn't seem like they're well trained enough in the US to deal with high intensity situations. So they're
Right.
firing off their weapons, because they're seeing somebody pull out a phone and it's black. And I've done that. Like I don't want to defend these people that do this in the US, but hey, I've walked at night and somebody pulls out their phone. You can't tell. You really
Right.
can't tell if that's a gun or a phone if it's dark. So I get it on that end, but they need better training. That's not an
Mhm.
excuse. Got to be better trained to know
Right.
that I'm pulling out a wallet and not a gun. Whereas here in Brazil, it seems like they're trained to like, yeah, you're gonna have to be an assassin at some point in this job. Now, in that, there's a lot of corruption and dirty cops and cops that make kids disappear, but that's happening mostly in the ghettos and the favelas. So my relationship with the police is outside of these areas. And yeah, I'm like, if I see a police officer, I feel more, I know, okay, I know I'm not gonna get mugged. I know, like, I have a different perspective when I'm down here with the police.
Um, has that, I guess, that dynamic that you bring up, I guess, with racism in the US, has that played a role in leaving the US? Like, kind of those, the police are looking to shoot people, people of color are kind of like, anxious around the cops. Has that played a role in your decision to
Not
stay in
really,
Brazil?
not really. For me, it was more just trying to get into a different headspace. I was in a bad
Mhm.
headspace, you know. But like I said, I didn't have any bad interactions with the police in the US, thankfully. My first bad interaction I had was here. That's why it's weird for me to say that
Right.
I trust the police more here, even though here's where I've had more bad interactions as far as the gun pulled on me. I've been stopped by the police at least, yes, I've been here at least 3 or 4 times that I can remember, you know.
Mhm.
I mean, once I was with my little brothers and my little cousin, they're kids, they're like little, and the police stopped us, you know, and I had to tell them, just stay calm, do what they say, boom, 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 and
Mhm.
then we went on our way. Uh, but then so it's weird for me to say that because I've had more interaction with the police here than I ever did in the US, but they're still scarier over there just from the things that you do see, you know, in the conversations with friends and everything. But it didn't play a role, though. It didn't play a
Right.
role at all as far as that, because I never had that interaction. The one time I had an interaction with a police officer, and he was like the friendliest guy. Like my lights broke. You know, I'm in the middle of like New Jersey's got a lot of those backwood country, you know. So I'm driving down this dark road, forest on both sides with no lights on. And then I see the lights, and I'm like, this is it. But he was super nice. He was like, no, man, do you need a ride out of here? So I got a ride from him to like a gas station. I left my car there overnight and then went back to get it in the morning. Here, I don't know how that would play out. I don't know.
Oh
I
gosh.
just say it in Sao Paulo, though. In Sao Paulo, outside of the favelas, if I see police, I don't get super nervous. The
Okay.
closer I am to, you know, uh, the central areas, I don't get nervous at all when I see police.
Okay. Um, so I just have only a few more questions and then I'll let you go for the day. Um, so within the United States, there's this discussion of like systemic racism that kind of is the undercurrent. I didn't know if you had any comments on that, and then whether within Brazil there's the same undercurrent if you think there is one in the US.
Oh, for sure. You get into the hot topics. All right, let me warm up here. Um, Another thing that is surprising for a lot of people to hear, especially for Brazilians to hear, is that 9 out of 10, I'm just making up a number, but let's say 9 out of 10 of expats that you will meet, Black expats, if you ask them what country is more racist, your home country, which mostly Americans,
Right.
or Brazil, they're all going to say Brazil, including me. Yeah, and it's weird because you're not going to notice it. It's not in your face. It's not an in your face racism. Uh, it's a very subtle racism, but you see the structural, like when you really get into that structural racism, In
Hmm.
Brazil, I feel it more than in the US. Now, I'm not saying I don't believe structural racism doesn't exist in the US, but I think Black people have been able to fight it better there. You were able to like get around it. You're able to break through and get somewhere. You see many more successful Black Americans than you see successful Black Brazilians. And that's not good if you consider that 51% of the people in Brazil do not identify as white.
Right.
Now, only about 9% identify as Black. The rest just don't identify as white because they'll either be bicolor or a little bit lighter. And Brazil has a weird, like, I don't even want to get into how Brazilians see themselves racially because
Right.
that's a totally different conversation where I've learned to just respect that that's how they see it. It's not
Hmm.
ever going to be how US see who is Black and who is white. That's another
Right.
topic. But that said, 51% of them say, "Hey, I'm not white." So how the heck do we never see uh, Black mayors, Black governors? Bahia, that's the cradle of Black culture in Brazil. That's like the New Orleans of Brazil, let's say.
Right.
That's where all the good stuff's coming out. That's where the samba, the good music, the good culture, it came out of there, just like in New Orleans with the blues and the jazz. So, uh, how's that state never had a Black governor? How? You know? So, that's where you see it. That's where you see, like I said, when I moved here to Brazil, I lived in a very nice neighborhood called Moema. I fell in love with it. It's beautiful. There's trees, there's parks. It's a white neighborhood. I was the only person that looked like me living in my apartment. Other people that look like me, either they're working, they're the doormen or drivers, excuse me, or they're working in a shopping mall behind the counter. They're not living there. So you start to see this. At the beginning, you don't pick up on it. And Brazilians love to say, "Oh, no, we're not racist. The problem in Brazil is classism." At first, I kind of accepted that until I thought about it. I was like, wait, but who's making up these classes? Wait a second. There's more to this story, because it seems like this classism of yours is very much Black people make up the poor class and white people make up the rich class. So I'll give you that it's classism, but there's a lot of racism involved in this classism. So the, there's a very concerted effort by Brazilians, and I think more than the U.S., because when Blacks were freed in '63, Lincoln, love him or hate him, whatever, but at least he put some things out there to help Black people get on their feet.
Hmm.
After there were a lot of programs after slavery, post slavery, to get Black people, whether it was learning a trade, school, programs to get them land. Land is so important,
Hmm.
and it was so much so that some folks, it's kind of controversial to say it, but they kind of can back it up with data that the most prosperous time for Black people in America was right post slavery, up to like 1930 or so. Like that was it. So I think Black people in America have gotten a bit more artillery, a little bit more to work with to break through the structural racism. Black people in Brazil did not. When slavery ended here, 20 years later than in the US, Black people were just like, the government just said, okay, go,
Hmm.
live your life. You're free. Free to do what? So what did most of them do? They stayed on a plantation. They
Right.
stayed dependent on their white slave owners, but in a friendly way. That's what's frustrating here, because it's like, yeah, look at us. We could have just let them go out and live in the wilderness, us ex-slave owners, but no, we're letting them stay on our plantation, and they can look. They have a house. That's freaky, but that's kind of how the interplay is. And I've only noticed a difference in the last. I mean, I've been here since 2009. In the Black movements have really grown here, and Black people have fought for their space. You know, so now I see more black faces when I go to rich areas of the city. I see more black faces in the universities. I see more black faces in magazines. My friend Elisa and I, we used to joke around about this. She's from LA, but she's been here since '98. She's Brazilian, brasileira, you know. But we used to joke around this game we used to play, waiting in the reception, you know, because of that red tape. You wait a
Right.
lot in the reception. So we're running through magazines, and the game that we'd play is spot a black face in this magazine. Whether it's an advertise, there was zero. Now I see it more. Now I see black faces on the cover of magazines. It's like, ooh, nice. So that's thankful to a lot of black movements here that have really pushed and fought to break through a lot of spaces. But man, it's just it's a divided country. They love to talk about how the U.S. is a divided country. There's the black neighborhoods and the white neighborhoods, but it like in the US, I never felt like, yeah, I can go into a white neighborhood, well, depending on the neighborhood, but I can go anywhere I want. Like
Right.
we have this attitude in America. I'm sure that you don't, unless you're like, yeah, there's some places that you definitely rethink whether I would, like Gloucester City,
It's
for
down
example.
south. I'm like, no.
Yes. No, in Jersey, it's this place called Gloucester City. I went there to visit a friend when I was like 16, 17, and he just flat out told me, he's like, listen, you got to leave before 6, you know, because that's when the Confederate flags start coming out. That's where the Jeeps start coming out. So, yes, it's not saying these areas don't exist, but for the most part, you don't think to yourself as a Black American, oh, should I go into this shopping mall because it looks very chic? Or should I go? No, you don't think about these things because we fought and we got that place. Like that, everything's ours. In Brazil, Black Brazilians still feel that way, some of them, you know. I tell this story a lot. I was dating this dude, and what happens? This black family came to Brazil, and sometimes I'll do a tour of the
Mhm.
city, Sao Paulo. This was like New Year's Day or something. It was really like last minute. They were here. I was like, you know what? Let's make some money. So, but dude was at my house. I wasn't gonna leave him here. So he's Brazilian. So I said, hey, come with me, because you can probably even, you know, give some insight that I can't as far as the culture here. So we're walking, we're talking, and this family, it's a family, mom, dad, and like 3 kids, black family, and they are at one of the most luxurious hotels in São Paulo. It's called the Renaissance. Top, like President Bush has stayed there when he came down here. Dude, it was like a like a mind trip because I'm walking with this guy and I'm talking, and then I kind of take my focus off of him to make sure, oh, is this the hotel? So I walk in like nothing. I just walk in the driveway, and then I turn to say, so where's this guy? He stopped at the sidewalk. And so I turned around and I'm telling him, come, and he didn't even say anything. He just
Mhm.
nodded his head no, or shook his head no. And I was like, wow, like everything that I had been thinking and from talking to black Brazilians and like their mentality, like that's living proof
Wow.
of like
Wow.
he did not feel he was worthy, whatever you want to call it, to take one step into that driveway. And meanwhile, I grew up in a different culture. My ass was just, "Oh, I'm here. I've arrived, you know? And so you see that way back from that ending of slavery and
Mhm.
black people not having anything to do after, not having any of these programs that were set up after the Emancipation Proclamation in the US, not having anything for these folks to have to build off. Brazil didn't have that. It still affects black Brazilians today. They're completely dependent on white folks, in rich white folks, because a lot of them work for them. Like another thing that freaked me out when I came here, when I started teaching English, and I go to my student's house, and then here comes this nice, lovely black woman serving me coffee. I'm like, what? I thought I was like in Gone with the Wind. Like literally, I was like, this is like Gone with the fucking Wind. And then I didn't, and then I find out it's not just at her house, it's at this other friend's house, and he's got a cleaning lady, and she's black, and this other person has a cleaning, and I'm like, what is going on here, right? So the maid culture is still here. And as a Black person, when I go to a class, how many times I've been asked to go up the service elevator? But then they find out real quick I wasn't raised here, and people lose their jobs. I've had people lose their jobs over that stuff because I'll complain and I'll make a big deal about it. I'm not going up any service elevator, but they still have that culture. So they'll say Brazil's a racial democracy, this and that, and they're not wrong in the sense that when it's time for us to go out, yes, you'll see Black, you'll see white, you'll see, it's beautiful to see. More in the middle class areas. When you start to get to some neighborhoods, no. But yeah, like the neighborhood where I live, that's why I live here, because it's a mix. I got nothing against white folks. It's like Malcolm X said, right? I'm not anti-white, I'm pro-Black. I have no issues with white people, right? So I like where I live because I got white, I got Black, I got in the middle, I got brown, Japanese. There's a lot of Japanese in the neighborhood. I got a mix. I got a mix. I got rich. I live close to a favela, so I could go down to the quebrada if I want to. I love that, right? But you see the division lines. They're subtle, but you see the division lines here of that's your space, this is my space. And when you're in that space, they treat you different. Like with me, because I was born here, so it's not like I can pass as Brazilian. No, I am Brazilian, So if I'm not speaking English and if I'm not dressed in a certain way, then I'm just some kid from the quebrada. Quebrada, by the way, is the ghetto, the favela. I'm just some kid from the ghetto. And they treat me different. And I notice when I start speaking English, when I change my tone, then they start, oh, okay, we can't screw with this guy, because Brazilians, it seems, and it's frustrating to say this, it seems like they've just kind of accepted that, it's changed, thank God, and it's changing. But ever since that, the way slavery ended and how they ended up in the favelas and how when white people started coming in, they pushed people out of the center. I did this wonderful tour last year where this lady, she would take us to all these very nice places in downtown Sao Paulo and explain how these were originally Black spaces. Because there's rivers here, because Sao Paulo is built on top of rivers. So when you get to the source of the river, that's where Black people had their tents and their villages. And then as soon as the Europeans started coming in, they pushed them out, right? When people come to Sao Paulo, especially Black folks, they don't like it at first. Because if you go to Bahia, it's very Black. It's in your face. This is a Black place. Rio de Janeiro, in your face. It's a Black place. You come to Sao Paulo, it's like, why the hell? Why does Phil love it here so much? It's the whitest city ever. It's like I'm in Seattle, right? And then you have to explain to these people, no, Sao Paulo has more Black people in it than any other city in Brazil. It's just that they've all been pushed out to the suburbs. That's why I live here. Okay. If you're just hanging out, I mean, it's wonderful. I love downtown Sao Paulo. But if you're just hanging out there, then yeah, you're going to have a very different experience and one that you may not like, especially if you're coming from a more Afro tourism. Then it's not going to be as fun as Rio or Bahia, Salvador. But man, get out to the suburbs and meet the real Brazil. Last week I was in Paraisópolis. Paraisópolis is the biggest favela in São Paulo. It's a whole world in there of, yes, are there gangs? That sucks. It does. But the rest, the community, it was the end of carnival. So a friend of mine, he works at an NGO down there. It was these kids, they were like 10, 12-year-old playing the drums, all with this serious face. They were serious. They weren't playing around. They were playing. Cutest thing I've seen. It was the best end of my carnival. After all the debauchery. I said, let's end carnival family, the family event, right? And it was wonderful. So this is where the culture is. This is where the real people is, and again, not just Black, white, mixed. It's in the suburbs, and it's where you get the real folk. But going back to your original question, which is, does the racism exist? Yes, it's like the the structural side of the US is there, but we have more tools to break through. Black Brazilians do not have enough tools here to break through the structural racism that they have in this country, because it's not by happenstance that it just happens that all the black people are poor and all the white people are rich. How does that happen? There's a lot that happens to
Right.
get us there. And beyond that, and this is really sinister, and I only found this out like about 5 or 6 years ago about race mixing. And that gets into that thing that I said, that's a whole other
Yeah.
topic. How Brazilians see themselves. Like somebody my color would not ID as black necessarily.
Right.
Okay. And I had to learn to, because in the US, I'm big into Star Trek. I'm a big geek. And so in the US, again, because like I never felt like this, wow, it's in my face, this racism, like I have to fight it. I always felt like I'm part of the United Federation of Planets, people. I'm a human being. So whenever
Right.
there was those questionnaires where they say white, black, Asian, I would put other. Like I put other my whole life because I identified as a human being until I
Right.
got to Brazil. Until I got to Brazil and I realized, oh no, I need to identify as black down here, like for political reasons, for social reasons, for census reasons. I need to identify as black, and I do because I saw how screwed black people were here.
Right.
And so when it gets to the structural racism here, there are not that many tools. So going back to the mixing, right?
Mhm.
Again, I'm all about love. You know, I love that the Supreme Court case that allowed interracial marriage, their name is Love. Their
Yeah.
last name is Love, you know, and it's like a black woman, a white man. If you're in love, love sees no color, love sees nothing. And love is love. So I'm all about that.
That
I'm
was
not
their
about what
birthday.
happened in,
The
excuse
June
me?
12th, the day the decision was made, June 12th, birthday. So I'm a love
Nice.
child. I'm a love child.
You are a love child. This is awesome. So, so I'm all about it. I'm not about what happened in Brazil though. And that, you know, because there's a lot of mixing in Brazil. That's why people are not so open to just idea something, because there was a lot of mixing, but it was forced mixing. It was in order to erase black people to the point where there was a law. And again, that's what I was saying. I only found out about this maybe 5, 6 years ago. There was an actual law. 1930s or 40s. Yeah, I can't remember the exact time, but Brazil opened up um, immigration from Europe, you know, and there were like no visa requirements, no nothing, like just come. And but as inside the law, it states why. And it says, one, to elevate the country's culture, and to whiten it. They actually use this language, like whiten. And they actually ask these people to mix, like meet, you know, have sex with black people, mix with them. So you get, like, remember when I said 51% don't identify as white, only about 9% identify as black, like Afro descendant black, because most people in Brazil are about, you know, my shade, maybe a little bit lighter, maybe a little bit darker, but that's because of all the mixing that happened here. But a lot of it was forced. It was rape. You know, it wasn't so, built from love. It was built from, yeah, we want to erase your color. So I get it when black people here now, the black movements, they're like then they're very pro-black, like black with black, like that's what we want. And they actually make fun of black people that date white people. They call it palmitage. What is palmito is the that vegetable, that white vegetable. Palm is it heart of palm,
Okay.
right? So
Hmm.
they call people that black people that date white people, they call them heart of palm people, you know, palmitage, because but I get it. I understand why for them this is very important, because there was about 100 years of, yeah, white people, and it's always like that. It's more white men with black women. White. It's very rare that you see the opposite. You know, a white woman with a black man,
Right.
and and it starts playing into black Brazilians' mentality about themselves, where they see it as a step up the ladder.
Right.
Like I'm marrying up. In the US, like I said, like we're kind of past that. And when we marry up, it's for money, right? It's actually marrying up, you
Right.
know? I used to date the kid at McDonald's. Now I'm going for the attorney, right? I'm for that too. But in Brazil, marrying up is not just money, it's the color of your skin. Because
Right.
those kids are going to come out lighter and they're going to have an easier time living in this country as light skinned kids. I work in the high school. I see it. There are not many, you know, I got
Right.
one black kid out of all my students. I got one black kid. So, because the schools here, it's a private school, so the private schools are a bit more expensive. So the the politics, the race politics here are complex. They're very different. You can't look at it from a U.S. perspective.
Right.
Brazil had a very different history from slaves being brought here. Way more slaves, about 4 million, were brought just to these shores. To the ending of slavery and them not providing anything for the slaves, so the slaves remain dependent on their slave owners, to the point of this mixing where black people started to believe that uh, to make it in society they needed to be light skinned, which the US had too, because we did have the
Right.
house nigger versus the field nigger. And the house nigger usually was the prettier one, you
Right.
know, in
The
quotes.
child of
Right. So the US had that too. The US had that too.
yeah.
But here it's more rampant, because
Right.
if you take that 51%, you take nine out. So you got 40% of people that are not ID'd as white, but what are they ID'd as? And
Right.
how do they see themselves? So it's complex. It's super complex. It's interesting, but I had to learn because I used to put my US goggles on,
Right.
thinking, oh, we're all black. We all see things the same way. No, you don't. And also another thing that I think really makes a difference, and it's terrible to say this, but Brazil didn't have a Ku Klux Klan. Like in the US, black people knew it wasn't just a mental fight, it was a physical fight, like for
Right.
survival to get to Freedom Road. In Brazil, they didn't have this. So I get it when Brazilians look at American culture and say, "How do you think we're more racist? You guys have the Ku Klux Klan. You guys have lynchings. You know, uh, the lynching laws were just removed. What, like 2 years ago in some states? So how the hell are you going to tell me?" And they get offended. They're like, "How are you going to tell me Brazil is more racist?" I'm like, "Look at your country.
Right.
Look where the black people are in your country. It's just that there's appeasement here. You appease blacks, and black folks have been brainwashed into believing that whatever life they have here is okay. Not all of them, but a lot of them do. And that comes all the way back from how you treated them post-slavery and
Right.
how you gave them enough. They say, look, but you got a house. We're not chasing you with guns. We're not sicking dogs on you. We're not hanging you from trees. You're good. And I think at some point, black people started to believe that here, and it's insane. But thankfully, there's a lot of black movements that have said different. It's like, no, we got screwed here, and we're still
Right.
getting screwed here. So let's move. I always say Brazil for me. When I first got here, I saw goth kids, and I was like, wait, this is like when I was a teenager in the '90s. The goth. I was a little bit goth. I used to paint my nails and everything. I like that look, that style. But I was like, wait a second, this is weird. This is like 20 years behind. And then living here enough, I started to notice, yeah, Brazil as a whole is about wherever the US is or first world nation is, Brazil's about 50 years behind that. Whether it's for women's rights, whether it's for gay rights, black rights, it's getting there. And
Right.
I'm not gonna just poop on Brazil. There's been a lot of good stuff that's happened since I've been here. Since I was looking through those magazines looking for some black faces, there's been a lot of changes, and they're positive changes. And not just black, but poor people have fought for spaces that traditionally were not there. Now if I go downtown, I'll see kids from the favela hanging out downtown, you know, whereas before they wouldn't. Like my whole family here, like I said, I'm adopted. I met my real family here, and some I just made. I just made my own family here, and they live in the favela, and I would invite them to go out with me. They wouldn't go because they wouldn't mind if I went to the favela, but if I took them somewhere that was considered more upper class, they
Right.
would feel they wouldn't want to go there. I made that a point. I helped raise my little cousin. I made a point ever since this kid was little to take him to these spaces, to let him know, look, I know you're from the favela, but you can go to this rich 5-star restaurant if you want.
Right.
It's up to you. Depends how you feel that day, you know? So it's a battle here. It's a struggle for Black people that are, it's different than the US. Very long-winded answer. You can tell that I have a podcast, right?
Say in the beginning, I want to hear your story. So it's no, it's good. It's good. All right. So the
But
last
can I just let me just before I'm sorry to cut you off, just to bring it just around because you said you wanted to hear my story and I'm telling more Brazil story, but all of this stuff, man, it helps you grow as a human. Like you see all of this, you grow empathy, you learn about a different culture, you see where you can make connections. Again, not just I'm not talking just within the Black world, whatever, connections with the human beings from anywhere, Japan, Brazil, wherever it is. Seeing other people's struggles, seeing other people's achievements, and then seeing connections. Like last week, I was here with a couple of friends and we were listening to some samba. And I was telling them, this is blues. Like what they're singing about in this song is not any different than what, Muddy Waters or BB King or Buddy Guy would be singing about in their songs. It's about the
right.
struggle, about tomorrow's going to be a better day. But right now, we got the blues, things in the rough. That's what classic samba is singing about. So when you see these connections and you see how people interact with each other, it's beautiful and it helps you grow as a human. So back, if you want to get my story as far as what I've learned from all of this is that it's
Right.
marvelous.
Yeah, no, no. And when I say your story, you're still telling it through your lens. It's still your experience with others. So, yeah. And I'm learning so much. I would be a perpetual student if I could, because I just love learning. But the
Well,
last thing
you
I
are.
wanted
We
to
are.
touch on was how would you describe kind of your overall well-being before moving to Brazil, and how would you kind of describe it now since you've immigrated? And how you determine your well-being is your terms.
Oh, sure. Um, what's that? The rat race. America's about the rat race. I'm not gonna say because there's folks that really like to talk bad about America. I'm not one of these people.
Right.
I think America's got a lot of wonderful things. It's got a lot of terrible things, but what country doesn't? But to
Right.
just be there all day, just hit that same key on the keyboard. America sucks. Man, come on. There's like wonderful, beautiful things in America, including natural things. I don't know if you watched that movie Nomadland. Nomadland, I think it was. It was gorgeous. Yeah, it was this Asian American director. I think she won the Oscar for it. I forgot her name now, which is a shame. But it was a gorgeous movie, which just showed it the west coast of America, gorgeous landscapes. You're like, America is beautiful, like the song says. There's a lot of good stuff in America, but it can weigh you down. I look at my life there versus here, pretty much doing the same thing, teaching, kind of you know, alternative stuff. I never liked the square type jobs. I can't, I wasn't as happy in the US going alternative, or I wasn't making enough money, or there wasn't enough time for me to actually enjoy my friends, enjoy going out. And I see that, even when I'm still friends with people from high school and stuff. Yeah, they got their friends, but most of them are just working from like Monday to Sunday, whatever. Uh, and they don't actually like everything is very internalize whether, it's like, okay, we're going to sit at home and watch movies and then talk about these movies on Facebook after. We're going to sit at home and play video games and then talk about this in some Facebook or Instagram games group, or we're going to just make little TikTok. Like everything's just it's internalized because we got to work, we got time for nothing, and maybe I'll see my parents on the weekend or not. It's so you don't realize how bad it is until you leave, because you do, like most things, if that's what you're used to, it's natural. I was listening yesterday to this montage of interviews with Quincy Jones talking about Michael Jackson, and the interviewer asked him, was Michael weirded out when Thriller came out and all this popularity? And he's like, man, I've known Michael since he was a baby, pretty much. And when I went to his house when he was 6, and there were already people out there, I asked him, how does this make you feel? And he said, nothing, because it's always been like this. Like, this is just my life. It's not healthy necessarily, probably led to some of his issues later in life, but it's, you don't realize you're in a terrible rat race. You're not making spiritual and emotional and friendly, human connections that you need to feed yourself until you're out of it. And then you realize, oh, my life actually sucks up here, like maybe I'm making more money, but what am I spending that money on? What am I actually uh getting, in my life that's going to make me a better person? So it's a lot of the criticism that people have of America. It's very materialistic. It's, it's be the top this, be the top that. And there's a good side to that. I'm extremely competitive. Don't get in the don't play tic-tac-toe with me. Okay? It's gonna be serious. It's gonna be serious tic-tac-toe game. Not like to lose. So I'm all about excellence. I'm all about my Muhammad Ali's and my Michael Jordan's top dog, and they knew they were the best. I'm all about that. But I've learned since coming to Brazil about just regular human connections. And I think Brazil taught me that. Like, I need to just stop. I remember when I was with my ex, we went to this cute little beach town, and we're ordering, we ordered some food. And I'm like, how long is this food gonna take to get here? Like, I'm in that mentality. So in Sao Paulo, it's probably the closest you get. So see how I'm not completely out of it? Because Sao Paulo is probably the closest that I would get to a US version of that, even though it's still a little bit slower, but it's a working city. Sao Paulo is a money city. So people are on their game here. So, but I'm at the beach city and I'm looking at my clock like, man, it's been like 10 minutes. It's been 20 minutes. Where? And then he just looked at me and said, look to your left. The most beautiful scenery you've ever seen in your life, right? We're inside of a damn beach. You got birds, you got water, and I'm like, all right, I'm definitely missing the point. I'm not supposed to be worried about when this food comes out. I'm supposed to be looking out there.
Right.
And then eventually, oh my God, I forgot I ordered food. Great. Now we got some good food in on top of that. So it was a learning moment for me where I was like, yeah, like Brazil was about be exploring and seeing the world, seeing the beauty. And there's a lot of beauty here. And I noticed even with my work here, like I have free time. Like yesterday, I went to the community center. Like I wouldn't do that in the US. Like, good Lord, but I went there and I had a wonderful time with this lady. Her little grandson was there. I was throwing him in the water, talking to her, and then he'd come back, throw him again, and then talk to her. And I'm like, this is what it's about. Like, I'm just having a human connection, with this woman and her little grandson. It's beautiful. uh, I can go to a neighboring city on one weekend. If I want to, I can, like, there's so much that I can do here. I like to run a lot. So sometimes I have my little routes that I like, but sometimes I just run and just see where am I gonna end up. Because sometimes I'll run far. I'll run 10 kilometers. I'll run 15. I'll end up in a neighborhood I've never been in before and find a park that I've never seen before and be like, oh my God, this is gorgeous. You know, if you, my Instagram page is just stuff that I find. I got a good friend here in Brazil. She calls me Fugo, you know, because I'm like Phil with Google because I just know shit. But that's because I go places and I can go places here. You know, like in Philly, I used to do that a little bit. I used to walk around a lot around Philly. I've always been a walker, but I the older I got, the less time I had to be able to do those things. I
Right.
couldn't do the West Philly to South Philly walk like I used to.
Mhm.
Because you got the time. I don't have 3 hours or 4 hours in a day to just walk around Philadelphia, just looking at, oh, look at that mural there. Look, I mean, it's wonderful. I live for that, but you don't have the time. Here I can, you know, I'm not tired. I woke up today to have this interview with you because I can. If I were in the US, I'd be like 10 in the morning on a Sunday. Are you crazy? Are you, are you serious? You know? But here I'm like, of course I'll get up that early because after I'm done with you, I'm gonna go out and I don't know where I'm gonna go, but I just know it's gonna probably be someplace special for me, you know, for whatever reason. So that's what Brazil specifically, you know, taught me. And I think it teaches a lot of expats that is how to live your better life, which is not based on money. Like I said, I know lawyers here, I should say ex-lawyers, ex-businessmen, they're making half of what they would make in the US. They left their 401ks and to make the equivalent of what would be, I don't know, $2,000 to $3,000 a month, you know, if you
Mhm.
transfer from the reais to the to dollars, and they're happy. You know, I got a friend who she was telling me what 80,000 a year she was making here. She makes basically nothing, but she can live off of 800 a month, $800.
Mhm.
She's living up in Bahia. She built her own she made one of those what do you call those like storage bin houses? I forgot, container houses, whatever.
Right.
She's happy. She's right by the beach. She's in this beautiful area in Bahia, small town. She's like, I would not trade this for those 80,000, you know,
Mhm.
and move back to Texas. I'm not gonna do it, you know. So it's a thing that only really makes sense once you get here. Because for if you had told me that in the US, like, yeah, drop those 6,000 a month or whatever the hell you're making to make 800 a month. Like, you know, did you have some of that caipirinha before you got to Brazil? You know, you drinking? What are you drinking? Because I want some of that. Or better, yeah, what are you smoking? Because I definitely want to smoke that. You know, you would laugh at the person. You telling me I'm gonna leave my 3 bedroom house to live in a 1 bedroom kind of mini shack? Are you kidding? No, I'm not. You're gonna love it or not. That's the thing. If you don't, get the hell out. It's not a
Right.
problem. It's not for you. Not everything's for everybody. But people that allow themselves to open up to that and realize, like, I have a very humble house here. Nothing
Right.
special. When I first moved to Brazil, like I said, when I lived in that upper middle class neighborhood, I was living in a nice apartment with a pool on top, gym, blah, 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 blah. I was miserable. I moved to this neighborhood, which is more middle class. You know, I don't live in a shack. It's a house with walls and windows, and I got a little yard, but it's a simple house.
Right.
I'm happier than I've ever been, you know? And I realize it's not the material things. It's not the material things in life. You know, it's what's within, Alicia Keys, right?
Right.
And it's true. It's cheesy. It's cliche, but it's so true. So when people move here, I think a lot of them have that realization. They're like, damn, you know. And I think the ones that have a miserable time are the ones that try to copy their first world lifestyle here
Mm.
because they realize they run into a lot of problems. One, the biggest problem is crime because
Right.
it's a country of disparities. So if you're flashing and if you're trying to style and profile down here, but people, sorry,
Right.
people are gonna try to rob you. And
Right.
that's gonna say, right? They're gonna try to rob you because that like the crime here is very predictable. It's not like in the US because you just walked into the wrong neighborhood with the wrong colors or you looked at somebody the wrong way, you know. No, here it's very predictable. You flat if you're walking around with an iPhone and you're talking to your friend and you're like this, like, oh, that thing's gonna get stolen.
Right.
Very predictable, the crime here, right? For the most part. So sometimes you have a worse time here trying to live your first world style life because it's going to be very expensive. It's going to, you're going to be stuck in these houses that have like a million gates and you're going to feel like a prisoner in your own house.
Right.
Like I did when I lived in Moema. I felt like a prisoner inside this apartment. I mean, my windows still have bars on them, which is kind of freaky, but whatever. But at least I'm in a house. Like I can
Right.
step outside, you know, I can go out. So I realized, okay, I need to get out of that mentality and live. Don't lose myself, you know, who I am, but go with the Brazilian flow. And then I'm much happier. Find the place that's right for you, and then you're much happier down here. And so very long answer to your question. My well-being here is like a million times better. Of course, I have bad days. Who doesn't? You know, of course, there's times when I'm like, why am I here? But then I'm like I said, and then the next day comes, and then a friend comes over, and you have some drinks, and you hear some live music because live music is everywhere here. People,
Mhm.
Brazil is a very musical country. Like, and then you're like, okay, this is why I'm here because it's beautiful. It's amazing. Like on Sunday, we have like today, one of the biggest avenues here in São Paulo. It would be like the Broadway, let's say, of
Right.
São Paulo. It's called Avenida Paulista, Paulista Avenue. So the name of the city is in the street, you know? So it's a
Mhm.
major street. On Sunday, they close it off to car traffic. So you go there, it's like a big picnic in the street. It's like a boardwalk. You know, you have live bands, you have like the gym. There's a popular gym here called Smart Fit, and they'll go there to have these big boom boxes, and you have like 50 people on the street just hey, 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 doing dancing. They're dancing in the street. They got food trucks. You walk another 10 minutes, you got another live band. Like they're just having a good time. So like if I'm down on myself and it's free, you
Right.
know, so if I'm down on myself, I take a bus down to Paulista and I can see people. I can see old people, young people, everybody having a good time, you know. Yes, does it get frustrating when you try to do serious stuff like the guys that didn't show up? Thank God, actually, because I didn't want to get interrupted. Yes, but I'm like, whatever. Like, I'm not like I would be stressed out like 10 years ago over this. You know, the fact
Right.
that they made a point because I told them, look, I got an interview at 10. I cannot be interrupted. Show up at 8, 8:30. I'll be up. They're not here. Right. So then I'm gonna get some weird call like at 3 p.m. Hey, are you home? Can we come over? I'm not gonna be home, you know? So, but I learned how to just deal with that and just be like,
Right.
yeah, but I'm in this moment right now with you. That's another thing that you learn in Brazil. Live in the moment. I'm in this
Mhm.
moment with you. I'm not thinking about what's gonna happen in 2 hours or what didn't happen 2 hours ago. In Brazil, because Brazilians really live in the moment, and it goes back to what we were talking about in the beginning. It's crazy here. It's a roller coaster. So how could I plan for 5 years ahead. I
Mhm.
got to really know how to enjoy this moment and this what's happening now. So you're very much aware of yourself here, in what you're doing and who you're with, and really capturing everything that's happening in that moment.
Does that carry over, like that happiness and being in the moment? Do you notice it carry over in your health in any way? Or I don't know how to articulate it. Like, like I don't know, your skin clears up, or you lose weight, or you gain if you needed to gain, or whatever the case may be. Have you noticed it like it come across in like your
Well,
health?
look, when I first got to Brazil, I'll tell you,
Mhm.
I had to get off the US schedule, talking about like shedding my USness
Right.
off. Because in the US we have a big breakfast, we eat
Mhm.
like a 10-minute lunch, and then we have like a medium dinner. In Brazil, it's not like that. Okay. So here they have a very small breakfast. Their lunch is like a dinner. It's a
Okay.
full, like everything. It's kind of weird when you see it at first, but it's like a full dinner. And then at night they'll eat something small. So what was I doing? I was eating the big breakfast, I was eating the big lunch and eating the big dinner. I gained a lot of weight here. The food is so good. So in the beginning, no, because I was living my best US lifestyle in Brazil, which is a big mistake.
Right.
But then I got hip to like the Brazilian schedule, and then I realized Brazilians, you know, they walk a lot and they're out a lot. I mean, you know, in the last 10 years or so, there's been a lot more American stuff that's come down here, McDonald's, Burger King, KFC. So you think Brazilians getting a little chunkier and unhealthier. But a lot of Brazilians are out in the field, like in the sense of, oh, excuse me, they're out walking the streets, or they're at the beach, or they're climbing mountains, or they're in the cave, or they're out like, or literally in fields if you go to the interior of the country. So I've always been a very active person. Even, when I was a kid, I was on the tennis team. Like I like to be active, but I'm even more here. Like I made a point to be even more. One, because I want to look good, because Brazilians look good, so you want to look good. Uh, but two, it's for my mental well-being, and the fact that when I'm out there running, or swimming or whatever, I'm meeting people, I'm seeing things that I haven't seen before. um I went to this beach town last year, and I missed the bus to get back. I ran 17 kilometers from the one bus stop to the next, and I loved it. I ran right down the beach, and it was a beautiful experience for me to do that, you know and be in the middle of nature. So Brazilians are very, very comfortable in their bodies. And I think that makes you comfortable with your body. I have a very good friend called Renee. I'm giving her a shout out because I love her. And she um, deals with a lot of tantra and sexual healing, relationship healings here in Brazil. And she brings Black women to Brazil for retreats to
Mhm.
deal with all of these, either it's whether it's sexual trauma or just being able to open up with your mate on a relationship level. And one thing that she really breaks down to these American Black women is feeling comfortable in their skin. And
Mhm.
you come down here to Brazil and you see people of all sizes, whether they're a little heavier, very skinny, or whatever body shape you are, they're going to the beach. They're wearing their bikinis, or they're wearing belly shirts. Sometimes you're like, girl, I don't want to judge, but at the same time, I'm like, yes, do it. I mean, if you're a big girl, what's that? We won't hate you. Shake what your mama gave you. Like, do it. Go for it. So I love to see it, how comfortable Brazilians are in their own skin. And it made me feel more comfortable in my own skin. Only recently, this is going to sound like insanity. I've only recently started wearing shorts because I never liked my legs ever since growing up. Always pants, 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 pants. Only recently, I've been starting to wear shorts. Maybe like 3 years ago, I started really wearing shorts. Shirts off. I never ever took my shirt off anywhere. Now I'm like, okay, like I don't mind wearing, taking my shirt off. And I notice like people don't look at you weird. Like, why are you got your shirt off? Uh, or even this is for the men out there. In Brazil, men wear speedos. You're like, what? And at first I wasn't up for wearing a Speedo. I'm used to the trunks, swimming trunks. But I started feeling comfortable with that, like, so, and when you feel good about your body, that's the first step about feeling good about everything, about
Right.
your mind, because you feel comfortable leaving your house and having other people look at you. If you can feel comfortable with that, the rest is just going to come, right? So, Brazil has taught me how to feel comfortable in my own skin. and working out and looking good and all this stuff. I think it's good for me. I don't do it, for others. Well, maybe a little bit, but it's mostly for me. I want to be healthy. I want to, feel like I can do stuff and climb a mountain and hike for 3 days and all that stuff. And that's another thing, man. There's another expression in Brazil. You're learning all the Brazilian expressions. One of them is Brasil é uma terra abençoada por Deus, right? Brazil is a land blessed by God. And when you see the nature here, you're like, you get why this became a motto. Because there's stuff here that's just mind-bendingly beautiful. That it's like you'll get like a desert next to a forest. Like even if you see pictures of Rio, everybody's seen pictures of Rio with the mountains on the back. It's like the picture does not do it justice. When you're there and there's this mist in the air in Rio de Janeiro because it's very humid. So you have this constant fog next to the mountains and you got the beach on the, you're like, dude, this is unreal. That's when I get when people are like, yeah, God is an architect. He's the greatest artist because you see stuff that is just gorgeous. And the country is so big, you don't realize there's deserts here. Here there's caverns, there's canyons, there's everything.
Wow.
From the southern tip to the northern tip, the Amazon rainforest, of course. So uh, so Brazilians are out a lot, I think, also because of this. I mean, I live in a big metropolis. When you're here, you'll feel like, oh, I just left Philly to go to Philly. So at first that's how you feel until you realize Sao Paulo also has a lot of natural stuff to enjoy too. But the rest of the country is much more natural. If you go to Salvador, it's like it's beaches, it's green, it's very, very in nature. So again, if you're afraid of insects and stuff like that, you're gonna have to get used to some of that too. That's why I'm in Sao Paulo, maybe, because I'm not built for that much nature. I love nature, but not that much, all the time. um so that almost forces you to be fit and go out and really enjoy being outside. Brazilians, and that's another thing that I learned too. Don't spend all this money on this house and this apartment because you're never there. You're literally never there. So I had to learn. I learned that from Brazilians. They're like, "Man, I mean, this is a nice apartment, but like, why?" Because we're out. We're out at a bar. We're out at a club. We're out by the beach. We're out by the wherever. Like I come home to sleep. I don't even have furniture in my house. I have my bed, I have a fridge, a couple tables here and there, a closet, but I don't have couches here. I don't have chairs. I don't because I'm not here.
Right.
Why am I gonna like I don't host people in my house because that's boring. If I meet somebody, we're gonna meet out somewhere. We're gonna meet in a park. We're gonna meet like why not? Like I wouldn't trade. And that's why I don't like going to people's houses either. I think it's so boring. I'm like, why am I gonna travel across the city to go from inside one place to be inside another place? So
Right.
let's meet at a restaurant. Let's meet elsewhere. So for the health stuff, yes, not just health, but also feeling good in your own skin.
Right.
Brazil will teach you that. Brazil will teach you that like that. Because you're gonna feel like the odd one out wearing all this clothes, and everybody's just like, ah, and you're like, yeah, I'm gonna do that too. Gonna while out a little bit.
That is all I had, and thank you for sharing. Um, I want to give you the chance to add anything if you think I should know or be aware of, but thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you for taking your time to talk to me and everything. I appreciate it.
No, thank you. I loved it. I loved it. And you're such a sweet person. And if you come to Brazil, you know who to call. I will be here. Okay. Come to São Paulo and enjoy some good food, some samba, a little bit of everything. And you have a good time.